As Lisa mentioned, my name is Tom Chipman. I'm Director of Partnerships and Advisor Solutions here at ModernAdvisor. ModernAdvisor is really thrilled to work with and support the IDC Win team, and I'd really like to thank Don and Lisa for all your help in putting together the webinar today. As Lisa mentioned, the title of my presentation is, title of my presentation is Leveraging Digital Advice in a Future-Ready Practice. And here's how I'm planning to unpack and discuss this topic. I'll start by talking about what I perceive to be the realities and challenges facing today's advisor. I'll introduce the concept of hybrid advice, share some data that I think suggests that it's the type of solution that investors are looking for, and that it's the type of solution that can create value and help address some kind of key behavioral challenges that I'll also speak to. I'll then pivot and speak to some very basic and somewhat foundational investment information, what I think are kind of the best solutions and way to approach investment strategies with clients. And I'll conclude the presentation with how I think ModernAdvisor can play a key role in helping advisors leverage digital advice and build a future-ready practice. And of course, as Lisa mentioned, I'll aim to leave some time, and we will leave some time ultimately at the end for Q&A. We've got the Q&A function set up in the Zoom. And if you have a question, feel free to add it in there too. But we'll make sure to leave some time to answer those questions at the end. And it may be duplication, but I know for anybody from Quebec, at the end, there's 6 multiple choice questions that you'll need to answer in order to get your CE credits. So I know we'll be sharing those as well here too. So with that agenda in place, excuse me, I thought I would start off with this initial premise. And I think it's important because it's my view of the world, and it's the foundational perspective for this presentation. And that view is that the world of financial advice is changing faster than ever. Clients are demanding a closer relationship with their investments. They want to be able to see what's going on right away and want to make changes as quickly and efficiently as possible. While at the same time, advisors are being asked to spend more and more time on compliance, regulatory functions, things that are taking away their focus from what they generally prefer to do and the value-added services that they deliver to their clients. And in this environment, many advisors are asking themselves, how can I deliver more value to my clients? And given these environmental realities, the big questions then becomes, okay, like how can I do this? What do I do about it? And to quote Jim Rohn, life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change. And change is absolutely what we've been seeing in the investment and savings industry. Perhaps the biggest change that we've been seeing in the investment and savings industry has been the introduction and evolution of robo-advisor and other self-serve online platforms. Now, robo-advisor is not a great term, but it is the term that has stuck. It's the one we've come to use to describe online tech-driven portfolio managers. These robo-advisor platforms, unfortunately, and especially when they hit the scene, have come with a very clear message to investors, to clients. And that message, unfortunately, started and does still maintain to be in some cases, hey, Mr. Investor, you do not need an advisor. You can do this all yourself, and we can help you do it. Now, I might be preaching a bit to the choir here, but my opinion is that while this might be true for a very small percentage of Canadians, and perhaps the same proportion of Canadians who've always been inclined to manage their own investments, I do not think these types of solutions are great for the majority of Canadians. And I think that the robo-advisor wave that purported the death of the traditional financial advisor has been greatly exaggerated here. And when we look to some data, when we look at some data about what advisors are saying in today's market, that would suggest to be true. Kind of my perspective that the death of the traditional advisor being exaggerated, I think it is exaggerated. And some data that backs that up comes from Vanguard Research. Now, Vanguard is the world's biggest ETF provider. So for them, great news if robo-advisors are right? If there's a better way to democratize all of this and you don't need human advice, you can do it all yourself online, that would be great news for Vanguard. But they conducted this study based on the growth of robo solutions and asked, will digital fully take over the traditional human advice? And what they found, in fact, from these client surveys was quite the opposite. They found that what clients said to them was that the perceived value add to annual performance was 5% for human advice, while only 3% for digital only. The preference for human advice is enduring, with more than 90% of human advised clients saying they would not consider switching to a digital only solution. And investors using human advisors estimated being $160,000 closer to achieving their financial goals. Now, this is all consumer self-reported data, but it does paint a very clear message that those that are working with human advisors are not likely to give them up easily. Now, the last data point here I thought was really interesting because we saw like the stickiness here for human advice is very obvious. There's kind of a clear preference, especially within those that are working with a human advisor, that they're likely to stick with them. But investors did prefer digital advice for portfolio management, for diversification, and for tax optimization. Interesting delineation there. And given this, I would propose that the future of financial advice and the future of the investment services industry, personal financial advice, is not at all about robo advice or human advice, but rather this concept of hybrid advice and how these two things don't push and pull against each other, but work together in order to serve the client's best interest, using technology, using digital advice where it makes sense to create simple, streamlined online onboarding, automate investment management systems, automate goal tracking, create efficient communication and compliance and practice management. These are X's and O's type problems that can be solved with good tech and good engineering, while also using human expertise for relationship management, goal-based planning, investment framework and design, more nuanced things like behavioral coaching and oversight. And I think by combining these through hybrid advice, where we're leveraging the best of what technology and human expertise brings to the table, it's going to be a great way to improve the experience for clients and advisors, and ultimately improve outcomes. Now, okay, improving outcomes. Everyone wants to improve outcomes, right? It's easier said than done. So how does that actually happen? Well, to me, another clue of how this can be accomplished can be found in another study that Vanguard did, which they titled Putting a Value on Their Value. And the goal of this study was to analyze various ways of it where advisors, be they robo or human, various ways that they can add value. And they broke it down into different sections. And their methodology for this is detailed. If you want to take a look at it, I would encourage you to have a look at the research report itself. They go into a lot of detail in terms of how they go down and drill down and have come up with these quantified numbers for where value comes from. Now, the key kind of bottom line takeaway here is they're showing 3% total value from advice. They break it down into each of these different categories. So cost-effective implementation, making sure you're monitoring fees, rebalancing to a target asset allocation in a methodical way, asset location, so tax efficient investment deployment, spending strategy, so in retirement, deciding where you're taking money from and how the investments are coming out. And then the interesting observation to me here is that these first 3 points, the first couple points there, are problems that can be solved by technology. Like I said a moment ago, I think good technology, good engineering can help investors reduce costs, automate the rebalancing and asset allocation deployment challenges that exist. These are rational problems that can be solved with good technology, good engineering, good product design. But the interesting thing to me here is, okay, if the total potential value is 3%, the biggest one here comes from behavioral coaching. And this is where I think some human expertise is essential. Why? Because while most of us, advisors and clients alike, we like to think that we're perfectly logical when it comes to our money. The reality is money is an emotional topic, and there's a lot of weird, wonderful stuff that comes with that emotional reality. It is not, for most of us, a completely objective thing that we look at. It is emotional, and there's lots that goes into that. Add to that, as human beings, our brains are wired for survival. We have evolved to come up with a number of heuristics that are, decision-making shortcuts that help us make decisions quickly, and sometimes without having complete information. And these behavioral shortcuts, they tend to make sense when we think about humans from an evolutionary perspective. If you are sitting around the fire with your tribe and everyone in your tribe stands up and runs in one particular direction, it stands to reason from an evolutionary perspective, you should too. But these behavioral shortcuts that have been ingrained in us emotionally and evolutionarily, they can work against us in the modern world when it comes to maximizing our outcomes. And this can be observed, I think, in a lot of different areas, but relevant to our conversation today in investing. Now, in the investing world, we all know how we have traditionally tried to kind of quantify this qualitative problem. We use a risk appetite quiz, we use investment risk profiles. But the reality, of course, is investor behavior is fluid and it's susceptible to a lot of these historical heuristics, these behavioral shortcuts that can create challenges and I think require a human touch to navigate. So what I thought I would do here is take a few minutes to look at a couple of these behavioral challenges and relay and think about how they apply in the investment world and how human advice is important in addressing them. The first of these behavioral heuristics that I thought I would chat about is overconfidence. Now, one of my favorite examples of this is people's perception of their skills as a driver. So I appreciate many of you may be working at home as I am here today and may not have had a commute to work. But if that's the case, think about the last time you were in your car. If you did commute to the office, fantastic. Think about your drive down, or if last time you were in a car, and think about, getting in your car, getting onto the street, all the maneuvers that you had to do in and around other drivers, and think about whether you would classify yourself as an above average driver. Now, when I hosted this presentation for an advocate session in Kelowna in the fall, being in person, we did a live survey, and I got everybody to kind of close their eyes and put up their hands. And interestingly enough, in that room of about 50 people, the data tracked exactly in line with what we see overall, where when you ask this question to people in surveys, about 3/4 say that they are better than average drivers. And about 80% of men believe they are better than average drivers. The challenge, of course, here is statistically, this is impossible. Only 50% can be better than average. The other quarter there, if not other, 30%, are wrong but they're very confident in their abilities. And one of my absolute favorite things that occurs within overconfidence bias is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias whereby people with very limited knowledge or competence in a particular subject tend to dramatically overestimate that knowledge or confidence. And then over time, as they gain more knowledge or confidence, they tend to dramatically underestimate their skill or ability. And then over time, they kind of get back to, a bit more average or realistic assessment as they get into the land of expertise. So, what Dunning-Kruger suggests, interestingly enough, is if you are a straight up beginner, maybe you're learning to ski or do something more technical like investing. But let's use the learning to ski. You're on the bunny hill, you fall for a first couple times, and then, hey, you have a run, you connect a few turns, you make it all the way to the bottom of the bunny hill. What Dunning-Kruger suggests is there's a very high likelihood that all of a sudden that person could think they could conquer the mountain, and that they really dramatically overestimate their skills. And then very quickly, as they ride up the chair, they go to the top of the mountain and maybe go down some runs that go beyond their expertise, their assessment of their skills tends to come very quickly back down to earth, even as they are actually getting better and more skilled in that particular subject. And so Dunning-Kruger supports the concept that a little knowledge is dangerous. And how does this turn up in the investing world? Well, I don't think for the rest of my career, I will ever forget, early 2021, when we had kind of the GameStop phenomenon, the rise of TikTok investing, and seeing this one video in particular of this couple in the States who held themselves out as investment experts, acknowledged they were new to the game, and released a little video that said, hey, everybody, investing is really easy. All we do is we go on our app here, we find a stock that's going up, we buy it, and then once it starts to go down, we sell it. Easy as that. And I would love to know where they are today, if they actually ended up making any money. But I think most people who kind of jumped in on that phenomenon are probably have learned a valuable lesson. They reached a very quick height in their confidence, and then maybe as the realities of the investment world unfolded, came back down to earth. So when it comes to overconfidence bias, I do think a human touch is required to help investors become knowledgeable to the point where they can maybe better assess their own skills or their own knowledge. Now, the second example of a behavioral heuristic here is herd behavior. Herd behavior suggests, and I mentioned the example earlier, we're in a tribe around the fire, back in the day, everybody from your tribe gets up and runs in one particular direction. That is herd behavior. We all feel that, organically in our bones from time to time. It is a tendency to follow the crowd. And again, it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, but it can lead to irrational choices. And a great example of herd behavior leading to irrational choices was illustrated in the Ash experiments in the 1970s. In a college in Pennsylvania, I believe, they hosted these experiments. They took initially a control group of 8 college students, and they gave them a very, very simple task. They said, okay, we've got this line on the left here. Please tell us whether the length of the line matches with A, B, or C. Easy, painfully easy by design, right? The idea is that, matches C very closely, very obviously. And in the control group, without surprise, 8 out of 8 college students always said, yeah, the line matches C, done and done. But then the true experiment happened when they conducted this for a second time. Same group of 8, but in this case, you had 7 actors and 1 study participant. And what they asked the actors to do is to say, no, okay. When we ask you this question, we want you to say it lines up with A. It's the same length of A. And what do you think happened to that 1 study participant who didn't know the other 7 were actors? Well, What happened was about a third of the time, a little bit over a third of the time, they gave the wrong answer. They went with the crowd, even though objectively there is a painfully obvious answer. When in a room with 7 of your peers that say the line on the left matches with a third of people were inclined to go with the crowd and overlook the painfully simple examples or painfully simple an obvious solution and answer that it is indeed C, not A. But people were tempted, and this pull to go with the crowd is very, very strong within human beings. And in the investment world, this type of behavior can lead into asset bubbles, panic buying, panic selling. And again, here I would reference back to the meme stock frenzy. We saw people going with the crowd in herds. The next example I have is loss aversion. Now, most of us have heard of FOMO, the fear of missing out. Loss aversion is at the other end of the spectrum. It's the fear of getting burned. Now, when we're investing, we expect to win. So when we do win, it kind of tempers down the good feeling that we get from that gain. So if we're investing money and we see $100 gain, we're going to feel some joy. We're going to feel some positive feelings, some pleasure from that gain. But it's going to be tempered a little bit because that's what we expect to happen. If, on the other hand, we invest and we're expecting to gain and we saw an equal loss, if you had a $100 loss, the pain from that loss tends to feel greater than the equal gain. This is an example, I think, illustrated by Danny Kahneman, really unpacked this difference between the pleasure from a gain and the pain from an equal size loss, feeling different to people. So losing stings. And so loss aversion would again suggest that people who have felt the pain of a loss are really afraid to go down that path again, even against rational reasons to do so. Loss aversion in investment can lead investors to be unnecessarily conservative, in my experience, especially if they've had a bad experience. And I know most of you out there will have had an interaction with a client. Maybe you're making a particular investment recommendation and they would say, oh, you know what? I invested in the stock market in 2007 and I lost all my money. Or I invested in mutual funds in 2001 and I lost all my money. Or I invested in ETFs in fall of 2019 and then I lost all my money in the COVID crash. If they had a bad experience and they made bad decision, they're going to have this feel of loss aversion that's going to dictate their behavior going forward, maybe even against what is rational and objectively true. The last behavioral challenge that I'll talk about here is anchoring. And anchoring is the tendency to rely on a single piece of information to inform a much, much more complicated decision. Now, certainly there's a lot more complicated decisions in life than shopping, but to illustrate how anchoring can work and how powerful it can be, I'll use an example of somebody who's shopping for a new pair of shoes. So let's say they're in the market for a new fancy pair of shoes. I don't know a whole lot about shoes, but apparently Jimmy Choo would be pretty fancy. So let's say you're shopping around, lots to consider here, right? You got style, color, shape of the shoe, you've got price, you've got, delivery, you're shopping around, then all of a sudden you see, only one available left. This is kind of tugging in on some urgency here too, right? It's creating a bit of a false sense of urgency, which is another kind of behavioral heuristic. But for anchoring, this works. We see this a lot with online shopping. What the heck does only one available have to do with your big, more complicated decision? Perhaps nothing. But if it creates a sense of urgency, it can anchor us to that. If there's only one available, I better act now. I don't care so much all of a sudden that these are €650 pair of shoes, or they might not be exactly the right size or style or whatever. Anchor to that and boil down that more complicated decision to that one single piece of information. Now, how does this play out in the investment world? Well, to me, the best example of anchoring in the investment world is You have a client who's looking to make an investment. Maybe they have a range of different investment options. Maybe it's a range of different portfolios, ETFs, mutual funds, what have you. They take a look at that. You can see scanning along the rate of return line and going, oh, okay, which one has the highest rate of return, and circling that. Despite the fact that objectively they might know past performance is not a good indication of future returns, and ignoring a whole bunch of more details about the investor or the fund manager, the actual underlying style of the fund, what's happened in the past, the context of what might happen in the future. Just looking at past performance, circling that, and chasing returns, I think is a great example of how anchoring can rear its ugly head in the investment world. So advisors are going to have their hands full with all of this messy decision-making processes occurring. But the data that we see from that Vanguard study shows that it can be valuable to the tune of 1.5%. And so, adding and working with clients through these behavioral issues and working kind of against them in some cases can really add value. It is value that human advisors can bring, and it is difficult for technology to work its way against it. ChatGPT does not yet have a way to prevent clients from loss aversion or prevent clients from chasing the herd if there's another GameStop type phenomenon. Instead, I think you need qualified, experienced advisors to help clients work through these different things that can come up. And to me, the way good advisors do this is a return to the basics. And apologies if this is too basic for many of you out there, but I do think it's worth mentioning. The investment basics haven't changed a lot over time. This is the tried and true. Diversification is absolutely key. It's important that when we're investing money, that we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket. Diversification across asset classes, industries, investment styles even is really important, and not to mention individual companies, is really important to mitigate long-term investment risk. Every investor, it's important to understand their risk appetite, their risk tolerance, in order to create the optimal asset allocation for each client. And it's important to rebalance as things change and evolve. It's important to rebalance back to that optimal asset allocation for that client, for that account, in a regular, clear, methodical way. And where possible, it's important to dollar cost average in. If you're generally lower risk to make regular monthly contributions or regular biweekly contributions over time than it is to plan to make one lump sum contribution at one point in time. We don't know whether the market will be up, down, or sideways. You can limit that risk by dollar cost averaging. And the important point here to me is these fundamentals can be accomplished in a variety of different ways from an investment perspective. One of the big ones, of course, is, okay, if you're deploying this proven methodology, should you use active investment, passive investment, or hey, maybe a combination of both? And, again, this might be straightforward in review for many of you, but for those of you who are building or looking to build a wealth block, and just as a bit of a summary, active investment occurs, where a manager or an analyst, when the goal of the fund, I should say, is to outperform a specific benchmark. Active management is staying involved. It is goal-oriented, and you're going to have a team of investment management experts, analysts, and their job is to select specific securities, specific stocks or bonds for the purposes of adding value. They're going to look at the market as a whole. If they're a Canadian equity manager, they're going to say, okay, we're going to invest in these particular companies, and we are not going to invest in these ones over here. And as a result of that, we think we're going to do better than just buying the market as a whole. The challenge, of course, in active investment is that these managers and analysts need to be paid. And as a result, active investment solutions will tend to have higher cost. And the question ultimately boils down to, Can active investment managers consistently create value beyond their own cost? If there's some cost to their expertise, they need to cover that and then some to create value to the end consumer. On the other side of the spectrum, of course, the goal of passive management is not to beat a particular benchmark, but simply to match it. So if you're a Canadian equity passive manager, the goal is not to beat the Toronto Stock Exchange, but simply match the performance of the Toronto Stock Exchange. And this can be automated with minimal manager intervention, which means that passive investment will tend to have lower fees. There has been a long debate out there about active versus passive investment. I think you'll find strong arguments on both sides of the equation. To me, there is no clear or obvious answer, and I'm not here to solve the debate of active versus passive. And maybe similar to robo versus human advice, the answer might not be clearly active or passive, but when and how active and passive play a role together in portfolio construction or in client needs. There are going to be some clients who are going to feel good about the idea, especially through periods of market volatility, that there are active people, managers who are making stock selections and trying to adjust based on evolving market circumstances. On the other hand of this, on the other side of the spectrum, there are going to be people who are going to say, well, you know what? I'm going to prefer the guarantee of a lower fee over the variability of higher returns for the long term. That would be a passive investment person versus active. Neither is right or wrong. It's about fit. And maybe sometimes, there's one end of the spectrum and the other for clients. Maybe there's a mix of between. Maybe people like the idea of active and passive working together, needing solutions for both of those. Now, regardless of whether you're using active or passive strategies, I think cost-effective implementation is important. We saw earlier in that research from Vanguard, the value of advice, that cost-effective implementation can be worth about 35 basis points or so. And the proposal in Vanguard study simply suggests that often, if we're looking at a particular asset allocation strategy, there is going to be a way to get a lower investment management fee. Maybe that's through ETFs rather than mutual funds. Maybe it's through some other means, but generally if there is two different options that have the same expected growth in the long term, and in this example, I'm taking $100,000 TFSA investment, so maybe somebody who's never invested in TFSA before. I know technically we're not at that level, but just hypothetically, to take taxes out of the equation, $100,000 TFSA investment, a 5% expected return before fee, 5% annualized average expected return, and a 25-year time horizon. And you can accomplish that either through a mutual fund at 2.25%, or through an ETF portfolio like one with ModernAdvisor. And in both of these cases, there's a 75 basis point payout to an advisor for services provided. Unsurprisingly, the lower fee is going to create about $60,000 more value, about 25% more over that 25-year time horizon for the client. So fees are not everything. Paying a lower fee does not guarantee a higher return in the same way that paying a higher fee does not guarantee a higher return. But it is an important consideration. And when you have the ability to manage fees, I think it's valuable to do so. So it's just an important part of the equation. Here, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I thought I would take a quick moment to speak to kind of one final investor trend that I think is worth acknowledging, because it's certainly been anecdotally important in the path that I've had in my career, and it's become more and more important. And I think clients and advisors, consequentially, are asking more and more about it. But this is the idea that social purpose really does matter more and more to investors and to clients. And some data here from a survey done from the US would suggest that this is true. And a few key data points. So 70% of all American adults saying it's important to them that their actions help make a positive difference in the world. Okay, that makes sense. We all want to be good people. We all want to have a positive impact on our environment and the world around us. 83% of consumers believe that companies should only earn a profit if they deliver a positive impact. Okay, we're kind of getting into socialism territory here, but clear messaging of what consumers are looking for through a data point like that. 94% of global consumers believe it's important that the companies they engage with have a strong purpose. Your dollar is your vote. I have a huge amount of respect for that. And then 63% of millennials say that the primary purpose of a business should be improving society instead of generating profit. That is squarely into kind of socialism territory. I wonder if that's a little bit of Dunning-Kruger going on with millennial perspective in that case. But one way or another, lots of subjective, nebulous stuff here coming from consumers when it comes to social purpose, ethical investing, ESG, lots to unpack. But I don't think this is a trend that is going away. We are hearing more and more from people that they want to connect the dots, and having solutions that may not perfectly align with somebody's subjective, ethical, or moral view, I think are going to be more and more important. I think we're going to need more solutions for this. And I think we're going to need to articulate how those solutions may apply in different situations in a better and better way as time goes on. So again, my goal here is not to suggest a solution for ethical ESG investment, but merely point out that for better or worse, these types of questions are becoming and are likely to stay mainstream. So I've talked about where I see the investment industry today, how the idea of hybrid advice, I think, can help address investor behavioral challenges and trends. And if you'll permit me, here's where I'd like to introduce you to ModernAdvisor and how I think our platform can help advisors address some of these challenges. So ModernAdvisor was founded in 2015 by a team of financial professionals and computer scientists. We've been proud to be a part of Guardian Capital since 2020, and we are a registered portfolio manager in all 10 Canadian provinces. So we can help clients in all 10 Canadian provinces. We can't do the territories, but regardless of where they live, we can help them. Currently trusted by thousands of Canadian investors coast to coast, including hundreds of advisor partners. But what makes us different from other robo-advisor platforms is that ModernAdvisor, while having our roots in robo, having our roots in low-cost ETF, passive management, and direct-to-consumer kind of beginnings, we have evolved quite a bit beyond that and are now one of the only online portfolio manager platforms and tech-driven portfolio management platforms that is available exclusively through a network of partner advisors. We believe very strongly that the future of advice is hybrid, and that by combining digital technology, AI, and a human touch, we can increase efficiencies, enable a better client experience, and ultimately improve client outcomes. So we want kind of the separation of roles and responsibilities. The way we engage with our client allows for this, where we are the registered portfolio manager. So we are registered across all 10 clients. We're responsible for a comprehensive digital platform for both the client and advisor. And we're taking on all the client compliance responsibilities for that client. But pairing with and partnering and complementing services from financial planners and insurance-based advisors who are focusing on what they do best: financial planning, insurance needs, tax strategies, relationship management, both working for the client's benefit. Pairing our expertise in the digital and portfolio management space with your expertise in the financial planning, relationship management, behavioral management, budgeting, whatever that looks like for your practice. Pairing together separate roles and responsibilities for sure, but having this hybrid approach to benefit the client. So we believe this type of approach does have a lot of benefits to advisor partners. We think it can help you increase productivity because we are the registered agent, and we're then taking on the compliance requirements for KYC, for KYP, and we're using our platform to engage with clients in a way that does that in as efficient a way as possible. We're using good technology, good engineering to solve some of those compliance challenges. We think this is a good way of future-proofing your business, enabling a digital platform, taking advantage of generational wealth transfers. It's big. Our clients have the ability to go online anytime. Online, we've got an app that works great so they can see and have access to what's going on at 24/7. That is table stakes these days, of course, but building that and evolving that, I think, is really, really important. Great revenue potential for advisors by adding a tool in your toolbox. If you're a seg fund advisor, if you're used to segs primarily, but you need another solution that is maybe a bit more tech driven for your more fee sensitive clients, we've got that solution as well. We feel like we've got best in class technology platform, flexibility for our advisor partners to customize their service fees. So it's not a one size fit all. You have the ability of charging maybe a little bit more of a service fee for your lower asset value clients, and maybe a little bit higher for those who are higher value, for whom you're maybe doing a little bit more because you're earning a little bit more. And we've been working with some advisors out there. One of the realities of this type of referral type of arrangement is it works great if you're an insurance-based or a fee-for-service type advisor. If you are a licensed advisor on the mutual fund or IROC side, we would need to be approved by your dealer, which is we have that for one dealer now through Worldsource, but is a challenge for others. But for some, we've been working with some great advisors out there who have maybe been in the mutual fund world, have a decent sized block of business, to them and to us, but maybe not big enough to really make it sing on that side of things. And we've been looking at working with them to transition away from that mutual fund environment into our type of referral based setup. And it's a great way for clients to get a bit of a reduction in fees, and advisors maybe to get a little bit of an uptake in their compensation. And of course, lots of benefits to the client: simple, fast, user-friendly account opening experience, 24/7 access to web and mobile, lower fees compared to the average mutual fund or seg fund, professional portfolio construction, systematic rebalancing, low account minimums. I mentioned from an investment solution perspective, our roots certainly are in the ETF space, and we have those core and socially responsible portfolios available on the platform today, but we have evolved there too. We have added some actively managed portfolios from as a result of our partnership with Guardian. Again, core and sustainable options there as well, slightly higher investment minimums. So we've got active on one side, passive on the other. And then if you have clients who are looking to blend these together, we also operate and have just launched this fall our Harmony portfolios as well, which are a blend of active and passive together. So that's the investment lineup. And to give you a sense of cost for core and socially responsible portfolios, our management fee is 40 basis points for the actively managed solutions, a little bit higher, of course, to include that investment management cost. Each of the funds is going to have an underlying fund fee for the fund OPEX or the MER of the securities used within that portfolio. And then our partners have the ability of adding a 1% service fee. It is a true service fee. It's not structured as commission. It's a service fee that clients are paying. We are collecting it and then paying it to you on a regular monthly basis. But you can add up to that 1% for the services that you're providing to the client. So robo-advice has evolved. We have our roots in direct-to-consumer, but we are now working exclusively through referral partners. We have our roots in passive management, low-cost ETF, but we now have some diversification of choice on the investment lineup too. The benefit of diversification, I think, is great. If you have a client who's looking for low-cost passive, we've got that. If you have a client who's looking for active security selection, we've got that through our partnership with Guardian. And if you're looking for somebody who's blending, you've got a client who wants to blend and has something in between, we've got that too. So range of different options here. And this kind of concludes the formal key components of my presentation. I've been talking for 45 minutes straight here, so I'm going to take a sip of water as I take a pensive pause and have a look at the questions. I will say I'm going to show my contact information here on the screen. So if you have questions about this, if you'd like to connect, I'd love to hear about your practice, how your practice works, and maybe how ModernAdvisor can fit in and help you build for the future. So my contact information is available here. You can scan the QR code to get a look at my calendar and book a meeting if you're so inclined. Otherwise, just would really encourage you to send me an email, reach out, tom@modernadvisor.ca. I'd love to connect and, like I say, learn about your practice and see how we can be helpful. One of the questions, do you have portfolio performance in 2022 compared to US and Canadian index? So yeah, we're putting together our portfolio performance right now for 2022. Our traditional ETF portfolios, both in the core and socially responsible versions, have been around for a while. So we've got a lot of historical performance for those going back to 2016, I believe. The Guardian portfolios and our new Harmony portfolios have just launched. So we have to wait until there's a little bit of performance history before we can share, but happy to share kind of details of what's under the hood and what we've got. But yeah, please, if you've got questions about specific portfolio performance, reach out, and happy to share what we've got there too. And somebody asked that, mentioned for life license advisors who are with IDC Win, do we have access without an MFDA license? Yeah, that is absolutely correct. So maybe to clarify the licensing requirements, if you are an insurance licensed advisor with IDC or anyone else for that matter, we can engage with you through a referral agreement without being mutual fund or IROC licensed. And that occurs because we have this very important separation of roles and responsibilities. From the client's perspective, ModernAdvisor is the portfolio manager, and you as the referral partner, excuse me, are acting as their financial planner, helping them with certain things that you would define as a part of the referral agreement, and that would all be disclosed to the client, but would not be specific investment advice, security selection, all of the things for which ModernAdvisor is the registered entity. So we do not need to, you don't need to be licensed. If you're insurance licensed, that's great. If someone was a fee for service financial planner, we could engage with you too. If you do so happen to have your MFDA or your IROC license, that's where it just gets a little bit more complicated, because it's important that your dealer is going to want to approve any of this type of referral arrangement. So a few are referred clients. So a few questions about client ownership. So yeah, and that's a good one. Through a referral agreement, the client is owned on ModernAdvisor side. That is inherent to any type of referral arrangement that can exist with a private portfolio manager. Of course, the key in many cases is understanding the person who owns the relationship with the client. They're in control in many cases, but from a legal structure perspective, this type of referral agreement is different from an ownership perspective as compared to seg funds or mutual funds or an IROC licensed in terms of ownership. Those are good questions and important ones to identify. Let's see. So a few questions there, and I think a number of questions that are kind of getting into some of the nuances, which I think are going to be difficult to articulate here about the structure of the referral agreement. And so a couple of people have asked if there's an ability to see a sample referral agreement, and that may be useful if you're looking to get a sense of exactly how the nuance of ownership would work within your block of business and the importance and how that works for you. But more than happy if you've got kind of more specific and nuanced questions about the referral agreement. I would just very much encourage you to reach out, and we can talk that through. And we definitely do have a template referral agreement that I can share with you if you're so inclined. And another good question here about whether ModernAdvisor requires our referral partners to have a certain minimum on the platform. And the answer there is no. We do not have kind of a seat cost. We're definitely looking to work with referral partners who are wanting to engage with us on a regular basis and have some form of commitment. If somebody were to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Tom, I've got one RDSP that I'd like to place with you," and that's probably going to be it for the next little bit. That's not generally the type of partnership we're looking for here. But technically, there's no issues or challenges with minimums on the system. One other person asked, does the referring advisor have access to client accounts? And the emphatic answer there is yes, absolutely. That to us is a big part of hybrid advice. So we definitely, while we have, under the nature of a referral agreement, a separation of roles and responsibilities, we definitely want to be working together in the client's best interest. And that is part of that is making sure that we're using technology to give you, as the referral partner, as the advisor, access to a really comprehensive system for reviewing client details, overseeing them, helping nudge things along, not giving us requests from the client, but helping keep the client engaged. And if they're wanting to do something, being creative on our side with technology to make it easy for the client to give us that authorization. And really important, helping clients onboard and having access to that where they are on that flow. So if anybody is interested, within a presentation like this, because we've got CE credits, which will come, there's a big kind of educational component, which is fantastic, and I hope you got value out of it. But if you're interested at all in seeing how the platform looks, I would very much encourage you to reach out, send me an email, or if you want to scan the QR code here that I'm sharing on the screen, schedule a meeting. Like I said, we can want to chat and hear more about your particular practice. But part of that process and kind of learning about you and how ModernAdvisor can help will be doing a little bit of a demo for the platform, so you as an advisor can get a sense of, okay, if I've got a block of business with ModernAdvisor that I've referred, what do I see? How can I see the clients? How can I onboard a new client? All of that good stuff. So while from a structural and from a contractual perspective, separation of roles and responsibilities is important, that's important from a client perspective too. We're still, hybrid advice and giving you lots of online access to make sure you have the ability to oversee what's going on with your client accounts and help them when need be. So we're approaching the top of the hour, and I think it's always useful to be punctual with this type of stuff. So I very much appreciate everybody's time today. I really appreciate all the great questions. I hope everybody has a great day. And if you have any other questions, just encourage you again, please reach out. Love to connect with you if you're interested in learning more about ModernAdvisor. So thanks very much, everybody. Really appreciate your time and have a wonderful day.